rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Here's today's prophecy update. What are the Jesuits and what do they believe? The Jesuits today form the largest single religious order of priests and brothers in the Catholic Church. Jesuits are called the Pope's men and take a vow of absolute obedience to the Pope. Though Jesuits have existed for 500 years, there had never been a Jesuit Pope until the election of Pope Francis in 2013. Many had feared the possibility of a Jesuit Pope because of the Jesuit tendency to involve themselves in politics and even to participate in the overthrow of governments. It has now come to light that the Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine was raised in Jesuit school and participated in a special mission with the Jesuits in Honduras as a young man. We'll learn much more about the Jesuits on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a dynamite subject today, just so that you will know, and it's so important to know. Liberation theology is the belief that if Jesus Christ were on earth today, he would be a Marxist. He would take from those that have, give to those that have not. Now, that particular belief system really took hold in the Roman Catholic Church, especially among the Jesuits in South America during the 50s and the 60s. It continued on into the 70s and still has an impact on the Roman Catholic Church today. It's especially important since the present Pope, Pope Francis, is in fact a Jesuit, the first ever Jesuit priest. Now, let's go back and give you a little bit of history before we talk about vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine and his association with the Jesuits. It was in the late 50s and in the 60s that the movement called liberation theology really gained momentum in South America. Many of the Roman Catholic priests laid aside their clerical collars, picked up machine guns, and overthrew governments. The greatest example we can give that all of you will probably recognize if you're old enough was the example of Nicaragua. What happened was the communists wanted to take over Nicaragua. Their mode of operation is they will find a heroic figure in a particular nation that all the people admire. They then try to kidnap his persona and combine it with their cause in order to influence the people to move toward communism. Well, that's what they did in Nicaragua. There was a great hero back in the early 1900s. His name was Sandano. All of the Nicaraguans thought very highly of this man. So what did the communists do? They took the name Sandano and combined it with communist, and they formed the Sandinistas. Now, you probably recognize that term because it was the Sandinistas that overthrew the government of Nicaragua, replacing it with a Marxist government. Catholic priests were at the forefront of that fight. Now, there's a lot more to it than this. The present Pope, Pope Francis, back in the 1970s, from I think 1973 to 1979, was the Secretary General of the Jesuits in Argentina. At that time, some reports say that he was sympathetic to liberation theology. Other reports say that he was not. Nevertheless, he held a very powerful position during the heyday of the liberation theologists. You might like to know that President Obama's pastor, Reverend Wright, is an ascriber to black liberation theology. So it's really not good for us to be ignorant of this, especially since Vice Presidential nominee Tim Kaine went to Jesuit school, and then he went to Harvard. After a couple of years at Harvard, he took 1 year sabbatical to go on mission with the Jesuits down in South America. Now, we're going to be telling you more about what he did there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to tell you anything that's not true. First of all, that's wrong. And secondly, it would be slanderous. So I'm going to do my very best to give you the facts like they really are. However, to avoid this would be irresponsible, because if Hillary Clinton wins this campaign, then Tim Kaine is going to be one breath away from being our president, a very pro-Jesuit president with a very Jesuit pope. You get the picture? And remember, the liberation theologists, which came out of the Jesuit order, believed that if Jesus Christ were here, he would be a Marxist. Does this present pope believe in Marxism? Absolutely. He talks about social justice all the time, which is a code term for socialism. And he never misses a chance to bash free enterprise. He calls it the liquid economy. Now, I like liquid economy because that's where the economy seeks its own level. Instead of the government telling how many shoes to produce or how many cars to produce, you let the free market determine. And that has been proven to be the most successful financial model in the history of mankind. However, the Jesuits don't think that way, and the liberation theologists don't think that way. And since Hillary Clinton loves to talk about being a progressive, and now then she has moved to adopt most of the policies of Bernie Sanders, who is an openly avowed socialist. Do you understand what's going on here? Can you believe that an openly avowed socialist, I'm talking about USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, an openly avowed socialist, Bernie Sanders, gave Hillary Clinton a run for her money, and during the whole campaign, well, there wasn't a whole lot of difference. And now then, since the primary is over, she's moved to co-opt a lot of his positions because she wants all of those millions that voted for him to now vote for her. And then she picks a heavily Jesuit admirer, and you can read all of his materials. He's very open to tell you the greatest experience of his life was the amount of time he spent with the Jesuits in Honduras. Now, should we know this before we walk to the polls on November the 8th? Hey, I think we should. Now, the plot really thickens, and maybe I will tell you even more before we're done, because this did not start with Pope Francis, and it did not start with Tim Kaine. This goes way back. Well, I might as well tell you right now. This goes way back to the time that Pope Paul VI was terminally ill. I believe this was 1976. Everybody knew that he was terminally ill. He had cancer, and they knew he was going to die. And therefore, there was a lot of maneuvering inside the Roman Catholic Church to elect their guy. Now, there were two main elements. there was the pro-Marxist element. Back in those days, it looked like communism was going to rule the world. It was gaining strength every way we turned. And so there was a faction within the church that said we must elect a pro-Marxist pope that will form an alliance with the communists. But there was an alternative belief system, a segment of the church that said, no, if we help them rule the world, as soon as they consolidate all their power, they'll turn on the church and destroy the church and establish a world atheistic government. Well, that segment that was against communism said what we really need to do is to elect a truly spiritual pope that will get the church out of politics and return the church to its spiritual mission. I come to know all this because I was driving in the car one day in the area of Chicago, and I was listening to an interview on WBBM radio in Chicago. It was an interview with a priest by the name of Malachi Martin, and he himself was a Jesuit. He also was very much an insider. He had taught at Vatican College for 6 years. He was an intimate friend with Pope John XXIII, but he was sounding the alarm, and he had just written a new book. The book was called The Final Conclave. As soon as I heard the title, my ears perked up because I knew what a conclave was. A conclave is where they elect a new pope. And final conclave? Oh, so this is going to be the last pope ever elected. Oh, by the way, your Bible prophesies a time will come when the last pope will be elected. I was all ears. And what this man said in the interview was basically what I've told you, that there was this huge struggle going on right then because Pope Paul VI was terminally ill. Now, Malachi Martin, he was for electing the truly spiritual pope that would turn the church back to its spiritual mission. And he actually wrote the book to try to head off this move toward a pro-Marxist pope. Well, needless to say, I went to the bookstore that day and bought that book, and I think I read it before the day was over. In the book, he couched it in fiction as to what would happen. And he went inside the Vatican. Of course, when you go into the conclave, all the doors are locked. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. It's a very secretive process until a pope is finally elected. So Malachi Martin painted this scenario. By the way, he's one of the foremost writers of the Roman Catholic Church. He wrote 25 books. Most of them are like this thick, 500-600 pages, many of them. A wonderful writer, skillful, but he couches most of his writings, not all, but most of his writings are like faction books. They're fact couched in fiction. And that's the way he wrote The Final Conclave. Well, in the book, he never told the story as to which pope won, whether the pro-Marxist pope won, of course it hadn't happened yet, or whether the spiritual pope that would get the church out of politics and return it to its spiritual mission won. When the Pope Paul VI died a few weeks later, I was all ears. Now, I don't remember whether my date is the 1776 or 1976 or 1978. Didn't have time to check it before I came on the air. But anyway, that was the era. Pope Paul VI died, and a conclave was brought together to vote on the new pope. I'm following the news with my ear glued to the radio, waiting for the announcement, we have a pope. Well, it came, and they gave the announcement of the person who had won the papacy. But I didn't know whether Malachi Martin's anti-communist pope had won, or whether the pro-Marxist pope had won. So I waited to see what would happen before I could decipher who was who. The announcement came 33 days later that the Pope had died in the middle of the night. Well, knowing this incredible struggle between world communism and the traditional religiosity of the Catholic Church, this huge struggle was going on. When they announced the Pope had just suddenly died, The alarm bells went off in my brain immediately. What is going on here? Now, they said the Pope died during the night of a heart attack, but he was 65 years of age, in perfect health, never had any heart trouble. So I waited. Well, in the meantime, they hold another election to elect the next Pope. This time, when they announced the Pope, it was Karol Wojtyla of Poland who took the name, well, first of all, the Pope who died took the name Pope John Paul I. Well, the next Pope took the name Pope John Paul II. But his number one claim to fame was that he had presided over the Roman Catholic Church in Poland under communist occupation, which of course continued from World War II up until 1989. And he had presided over the Roman Church, and the church had not only survived, but thrived. He knew how to get along. And as soon as I heard this, I thought, uh-oh, I think that Malachi Martin's anti-communist Pope won, and they killed him. And therefore, when they elected the new Pope, they got their pro-communist Pope. But yet I waited. It was 2 or 3 months later, a book was published called In God's Name by David Yallop. And in this book, David Yallop contended that the Pope was assassinated and actually disclosed how they did it. A little bit later, maybe a couple of months later, another book came out called Pontiff. It had 2 authors working together, and they contended that Pope John Paul I was assassinated. Well, now I'm really wondering. I arranged for Malachi Martin to come on our radio show, this radio program. Back in those days, it was called Politics and Religion. He came on the show, and so I asked him, because he had written a book in which he intimated that the Pope had been assassinated. And so I asked him point blank, because the book was couched in fiction. I said, Mr. Martin, was the Pope assassinated? He said, for all of us insiders, we have no doubt that he was assassinated. Now, what's the point? Remember, liberation theology is a combination between communism and Catholicism. The Bible actually prophesies that the end time one world government will be a combination between communism and Catholicism. If you'd like to know where that is in the Bible, get our DVD, Holy Roman Empire Reborn. Better yet, get our entire series, Understanding the End Time, 14 DVDs that will give you what the world government will look like, which nations will participate in that world government, the Holy Roman Empire. What is the Holy Roman Empire? If you don't know what the Holy Roman Empire is, you probably will not understand liberation theology. But then after you understand that, then you can understand where the Antichrist will come from, where the false prophet will come from, their partnership, which always existed, always in the Holy Roman Empire. There were 2 rulers, a political leader and a spiritual leader, every single time. The spiritual leader was always from Europe. I said that wrong. The political leader was always from Europe. The spiritual leader was always from Rome. Well, the Bible says it's going to happen again. And that's what liberation theology is all about. It is the belief among the Roman Catholic Church that some, not all Catholics hold, that if Jesus were here today, he would be a Marxist. He would be into wealth redistribution. He would take from those that have, give to those that have not. And a lot of people say, well, may not be too bad. Well, if you're among the have-nots, of course, you'd like for someone to give you somebody else's goods, take from them, give to you. I mean, that's not a new message. It's as old as humankind itself is. Nevertheless, let's look. So what in fact happened? Pope John Paul II came along, and he began to build relations with Russia, with the Soviet Union, and with communism. As a matter of fact, the first year of his papacy, He said, we're not going to tell communism that we're going to bury them. We're going to show them how to make socialism work before they bury themselves, because right then, communism was starting to decline. The economic model was not working because socialism never works, even though they're trying to foist it on the United States of America. It never works. That's the reason Russia has thrown off the model and China has thrown off the model, and their economies are going up and ours is going down because we're taking on socialism. We just turned 20% of our economy over to socialism under the Obamacare bill. We put 20% of the U.S. economy in the hands of the government in one act. And the socialists were absolutely gleeful. And they still are. Well, anyway, Pope John Paul II, he had a Secretary of State, Agostino Casaroli, who began to build bridges to communism. Now, at first, there was a trade union out of Poland called Solidarity. Lech Walesa was the leader of it. He was a union leader. And they imprisoned him for a year or so. But then Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power, and the Pope and Gorbachev got along famously, and after a while they turned Lech Walesa loose. And if my memory serves me right, it was 1998 or 1999. No, I said it wrong. It was 1988 that Gorbachev said, okay, Solidarity, which had been outlawed by the communists because they still had a death grip on Poland and all the other Eastern European nations. But now they said Solidarity can run for office. Well, Lech Walesa ran at the head of the Solidarity Party, ran for office, and they won overwhelmingly. So now we've got this labor union leader handpicked by the Pope. As a matter of fact, he had his own personal priest that was with him. The news report said that his priest was never far from the labor leader's side, advising him on what to do, because the priest was the conduit from Pope John Paul II on how we can get communism and the church to work together successfully. Well, they won the election, and now the thing is building, and Gorbachev is liberalizing. And in 1989, the wall came down. But the wall was not just a spontaneous happening. This was a result of the work behind the scenes for the last 10 years of Agostino Casaroli, which by the time the wall came down was the Secretary of State of the Vatican. And Agostino Casaroli, when the Pope met with Gorbachev 20 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall, guess who made the introductions? Agostino Casaroli. He'd been working on this project for 10 years. Now, some people say that the Pope undermined communism and brought it down, but the truth of the matter was, this was a cooperative between communism and Catholicism. If you want to hear this full story, well documented, we have a DVD. It's part of our Understanding the End Time series called The Coming One World Religion. There's actually 2 tapes to The Coming One World Religion in our Understanding the End Time series. The best thing is just to get the whole series. You need all this information because it will explain to you what is going on in the world. Now, why am I talking about this? Because we now have a Jesuit Pope who believes that if Jesus Christ were here, he would be a communist or a socialist. Same thing. I mean, the USSR was communist. But the USSR means Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So is socialism bad? Not if you want to live in slavery, it's not. Not if you want the government to control all of your life, it's not. Not if you want the government to control the means of production and set all the wages and tell you what you can do and what you cannot do, then socialism is not bad. But if you like freedom and free enterprise, then socialism is enemy number 1. Okay, but the liberation theologists don't believe in free enterprise. This present Pope, now I'm going to speak openly, I'm not going to be politically correct here. This present Pope is a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. Remember, he was the Secretary General over the Jesuits in Argentina from 1973 to 1979. He was there when it happened. He understands all about it, and then he comes to office. Should we be surprised that he all the time talks about social justice? You know, that's a really nice dress to put on, because who's not for social justice? If you're a Christian, you want to be just to everybody. But social justice is just a code word for socialism. I mean, it's like liberation theology. Nice sounding term until you realize what it is, and that is the belief that all the world should be a communist dictatorship, and that's what Jesus Christ would favor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's what's going on right now. I didn't really mean to come here to say this to you, but I am going to say it to you. You need our 14-lesson series called Understanding the End Time. If you have not been through all 14 of those DVDs, you need to know, because history is not what you read in the papers, and it's not what you read in your history books. I'll never forget the last day of U.S. history when I was a junior in high school. We came to the last chapter of the book, and the title was United Nations, Mankind's Last Hope for Peace. I was a young 16-year-old. I was gullible. I didn't know even what the United Nations was at the time. Mankind's last hope for peace? I'm telling you, the United Nations is going to be the instrument the Antichrist will use to enslave the world. So they were telling me it was my hope, when really it's my worst enemy. Well, that's what's going on here with this particular emergence of liberation theology, and with the Jesuits rising to unprecedented places of power. If you'd like to reach us, give us a call. If you'd like to order the Understanding the End Time series, the number to call is 1-800-END-TIME. You've been listening to End of the Age.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like, how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
Who would have thought it, that the Berlin Wall is right there in the prophecies of the Bible? I'm holding here a chunk of the Berlin Wall. A friend of mine was in Berlin the night that the wall fell, November 9, 1989. He cut a piece of the wall for himself, twice this large. He was kind enough to cut it in half. He had read my book, A Message for the President, in which I had stated 3 years before this that the Berlin Wall would come down, the two Germanys would be reunited, and that would be the event that would mark the beginning of the one world governmental system called the New World Order.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME to order The Berlin Wall in Bible Prophecy.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the Watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the Archives button.
You know, when you get behind the scenes and you see what is never reported by the media, and many things the media itself does not understand, and all of a sudden the pieces of the puzzle come together, it can be eye-opening, especially when the events perfectly match what the Bible prophesies is going to happen. I've had this experience so many times. That's the way I knew the Berlin Wall was coming down. That's the way I knew to put it in my book. 3 years before it happened, I began to teach it was coming down. 21 years before it happened. I'll never forget. It was 1968 when I first saw in the scripture and through current events that the Berlin Wall would come down, the two Germanys would be reunited, and that would be the event that would throw us into the process of globalization, which is designed to lead us to a new world order. Tony Blair, in his lectures at Yale University, in his course called Faith and Globalization, made this statement that globalization began with the fall of the Berlin Wall. I said in my book, he just said this within the last 3 or 4 years. I said in my book in 1986 that the fall of the Berlin Wall would be the beginning of the New World Order. And now we have Mr. Tony Blair saying the same thing after the fact, because it's true. We are moving into one world government, and now this present presidential election is all about, do you believe in the nation state and the independence of the United States of America, or do you want to be blended into this great global governance system that they're planning for us through globalism or globalization? Ladies and gentlemen, you better listen to me on this one. I don't normally get that strong. I'm telling you, there are plans out there at the highest levels to put us into a one world governmental system. Okay, in case you don't understand, you think I'm going radical on you. I'll never forget the day I picked up Time magazine. It was July the 20th of 1992. And the article said, Birth of the Global Nation. Well, it immediately had my attention because I know the Bible prophesies a one world government. I bought the magazine, I read the article, and the man was just simply saying, matter of fact, his famous statement was, in the 21st century, national sovereignty as we have known it will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority. Well, this article was written by a man by the name of Strobe Talbot. I'd never heard of him before. But believe me, I started following him from that day forward. It wasn't long until his path led straight to the White House. Bill Clinton was president at the time. And in 1994, Strobe Talbot was asked by President Clinton to become Deputy Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State is who determines the foreign policy. The Deputy Secretary of State, they're the ones that do the heavy lifting, most of the work. While the Secretaries of State are out there meeting heads of state and traveling the world, it's their deputies that are pounding out the policies, and many times more influential than the Secretary of State, him or herself. Well, he became the Deputy Secretary of State in 1994. He stayed in that position until Bill Clinton left office in 2001. Well, now then, Strobe Talbot needed a new job. He found a wonderful job, president of the Brookings Institute. Now, the Brookings Institute is known as the most famous liberal think tank in America. They help determine the policies of presidents. They help write the speeches, because the president is busy. He doesn't have time to pound out all these nitty-gritty details. So they prepare everything, present it to him. He reads it, asks questions, and he either buys it or he rejects it. So they're very, very influential. So Strobe Talbot became head of the Brookings Institute in 2001. Within a year or two, a lady joined his firm called Susan Rice. She was the senior fellow for foreign affairs. Now, for the Brookings Institute, she joined Strobe Talbot, who said national sovereignty will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority in the 21st century. Now, she's working with him. 2 years later, a young man by the name of Barack Obama decided to run for the presidency. He called Strobe Talbot. Strobe, I need a foreign policy advisor. Talbot said, got just the person for you, Susan Rice. So she takes a leave of absence from the Brookings Institute and goes to work for Barack Obama in his campaign. They win the election. Now, where does she go? Barack Obama appoints her to be the United Nations ambassador from the United States. She's going there to the only world government body on earth to preach the same gospel. National sovereignty will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority. This is the whole plan behind the United Nations. The whole plan is that all of national sovereignty will be absorbed into one great world government. All of the armies of the world will be dissolved and we'll have one world army. So now you have no more war. If you only have one army, it won't fight with itself. One problem, of course, what if Adolf Hitler gets control of that one world army? And people say, never happened, but it will happen. Only it won't be Adolf Hitler, it will be someone worse. The Bible calls him the beast or the Antichrist. So now then, Susan Rice is our UN ambassador. Then at the second term of Barack Obama, he elevates her further, national security advisor, sitting at his elbow in the White House all the time. And here's the person that believes that national sovereignty will cease to exist in the 21st century. And she's preaching that in the president's ear every day, and he already believed it anyway. He believes in multilateralism. Now you got to really learn what these terms mean. What's the term multilateralism? That'll make your eyes glaze over until you know what it means, and then it'll make you snap to attention. What that means is that the U.S. should not run the world unilaterally, that we should put together a coalition, preferably under the United Nations, and everything should be run through a democracy of nations under the United Nations. It's one world government. It's global governance. Now, that's what's going on in our world right now. And if you don't know what's going on, well, you'll just probably watch your latest football game or soap opera or whatever you watch, and you'll just blissfully drift along while they are building this new world order. You say, I just can't believe what you're telling me. All right, get a dollar bill out right now. Pull it out. Look on the back. There's a pyramid there. There's a ribbon underneath the pyramid. It says Novus Ordo Seclorum. What's that mean? Why did they write it in a foreign language? They wrote it in Latin. I took a couple of years of Latin in school. I happen to know what it means. The word novus is new, ordo is order, and seclorum is secular or world. New world order. On your dollar bill. Who put it here? President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the same man that was the driving force behind the formation of the United Nations, which is designed to be a one world government. The United Nations is designed to be a new world order. President Herbert Walker Bush said it right after the Berlin Wall fell. He said, we have a real chance of this new world order where the United Nations will reach its full potential originally intended by those who produced it. He said, we have a real chance of this new world order. And he said, when we are successful, and then he said, and we will be, I have it on video. When we are successful, and we will be, we'll be all in this new world order under a global democracy, and all the power will be right there at the UN Security Council. And finally, one man will sit at the top as General Secretary. Oh, by the way, don't look now, but they're going to be electing a new General Secretary within the next 30 to 60 days. The term of Ban Ki-moon expires on December the 31st. They've got to choose a new Secretary General. Now, don't tell anybody, but the rumors are that President Obama would like to have the job when he leaves the presidency. He leaves the presidency January the 20th, but he's actually going to be a lame duck come November the 8th when the elections take place. Could they elect Barack Obama as the next Secretary General of the United Nations? Well, if they want a one-worlder, he's the very guy they should elect. And if you want to hear a campaign speech for that job, go read his speech at the United Nations just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He spoke at the UN General Assembly, and I watched that speech and I listened to every word, and I thought he is campaigning to be the next Secretary General. I don't know whether he's going to get it or not. All I can tell you is we are closer than we've ever been to a one world governmental system. And oh, by the way, liberation theology is doing its part because Pope Francis and Barack Obama are common bedfellows. They believe the same things. They're pushing the same things. They both like to talk about social justice, sharing the wealth. They're all talking about the same thing. Okay. You've got me all steamed up today. I got to tell you something. I'm going to be speaking in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this coming Friday evening, October the 7th, at 7:30 p.m. at the Metro Pentecostal Church, 8611 East 21st Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm going to be speaking about From Here to Armageddon. I will be telling you in detail what's going to happen from today to the second coming of Jesus and the Battle of Armageddon. I'll be talking to you about the world's greatest revival just ahead. Now that's the good side. The world's greatest apostasy is also just ahead. The Antichrist is on the earth right now, no doubt in my mind. The mechanism for the mark of the beast is being put in place right now. And then the next evening on Saturday, October the 8th at 6 p.m., I'm going to be speaking on, will Islam rule the world? There's a lot of people believe that Islam's getting ready to take over the world and that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. You'll want to hear this lesson. I will be at the Abundant Life Church in Moore, Oklahoma for this lesson, 777 Southwest 19th Street in Moore, Oklahoma. So you can come to both of the sessions since I'm speaking on different subjects at each one. I hope you can be there. So will the Antichrist be a Muslim? What will the outcome of the present crisis with ISIS be? What do the Islamic prophecies foretell? And then on Sunday morning, also in Moore, Oklahoma, I will be speaking on breaking prophetic fulfillments. That's October the 9th at 10 a.m. And that is at the Abundant Life Church, 777 Southwest 19th Street, Southwest 19th Street in Moore, Oklahoma. I'll be talking about, will the final 7 years begin this year? Why did the Pope receive the Charlemagne Prize? And what's going to happen with global terrorism that we're also concerned about? Where's it going to end up? And then on Sunday morning, after my prophecy update, we're going to throw it wide open for question and answers from the floor. So bring your questions with you, and you'll be allowed a time to ask those questions. Okay, I'll tell you what. I've got a lot more material for you, but I don't have time to do it today. I think we'll probably pick this up again tomorrow. So we're going to be taking your calls in the last segment of our program. If you'd like to be on the air with me, the number to call, 877-END-TIME, 877-363-8463. If you need to reach us here at End Time, call us. 800-END-TIME is the way to reach our operators. Wow, what in the world is going on? Everything is going on.
Take your understanding of the end time to a new level with our Outlines and Quizzes workbook. This workbook accompanies our Understanding the End Time 14 lesson series. As you watch each lesson, follow along with the outlines, then take a quiz and check your answers at the end. These are all contained in one convenient workbook so you can study as well as teach prophecy wherever you go. Use it as a study guide to cement main points and scriptures that Irvin teaches in each lesson. It's also a great tool if you host an End Time Bible study. Help your group solidify what they're learning by getting a copy for each person to follow along with the video and then to take home and study on their own. Get the workbook by calling 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com and be ready to instruct many as the scripture says.
Well, tonight will be the vice presidential debate between the two vice presidential candidates, Mike Pence and Tim Kaine. It's going to be very, very interesting. Now, we probably should pay close attention because Hillary Clinton and also Donald Trump are two of the oldest people ever to run for president. That means we don't know that they'll even serve out their term or not. So either of these men that you will be listening to tonight, both of them, one of them at least, is going to be one heartbeat away from the presidency. You may be listening to a future president of the United States of America. So it's very interesting. I've got some more to talk about, and perhaps we'll talk about this tomorrow. We also will be talking about the debate that will be held tonight, because sometimes they say one thing, but some of you have listened long enough, you know what some of the issues are behind the scenes. And sometimes you've got to sort of read between the lines in order to really understand what's going on. All right, we're going to take your calls in this segment. Let's go straight to Florida. Joseph is calling from Florida. Hello, Joseph, what's on your mind?
Hello, I'm going to be quick because I know you have other callers. Okay, I was listening to some newscasts online about this Iranian naval base, that it's going to be built right outside of Rome, west of Rome, like a couple of miles. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. Now, you showed us that when the second trumpet blew and a great mountain was thrown into the sea, that was the atom bomb being dropped on Japan. Now, for some reason, I don't know how I realize this, but in Revelations 18:21, it talks about the mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, threw it into the sea. They're talking about the destruction of Babylon, which you've shown us is Rome. And all of a sudden I realized the name of Israel's missile defense system is David's sling. What did David use to slay the giant? A stone. Does any of this make sense to you?
Yes, it does. However, I want to say this. The second trumpet in Revelation 18:21 is not the same thing, but they both may well be a nuclear bomb. The second trumpet was the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, but the Bible teaches that Rome will be destroyed at the time of the Battle of Armageddon. So,
well, that's what I meant, because this naval base, there's a little port right outside of Rome. That's where Iran is going to build a naval base. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute, they're going to build it right there. And it talks about a great stone being thrown in the water, and David's sling is Israel's missile, the missile system.
Yeah, and let me make sure everyone understands. The nuclear capability of Israel is called the Samson option, but the defense missile system is called David's sling. You're absolutely right. Now, Joseph, I want to ask you one thing. I had not read that the naval base they're establishing was so close to Rome. You're saying it's a couple of miles from Rome. Is that right?
Yes, and I will find the article and I will email it to you.
Okay, very good. Well, I don't doubt it at all, but it's very interesting to me. And by the way, you brought up some good points today, and I sure do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you and God bless.
Okay, well, thank you, Joseph. Wow, exciting things. Let's talk now. Let's go to Pam. Pam is calling from Michigan. Hello, Pam.
Hi. I am asking this question. I'm wanting to know, what is the difference between the European Union, the one world government, and the United Nations? Like, are they all three going to be the same thing eventually?
Well, the United Nations is designed from the get-go to be a world government. The European Union is designed to bring all of Europe together. However, many people believe that if the UN does not reach its full potential, especially if the United States would thwart the ambitions of the UN, that it would be very easy to move the UN to Europe, because the working office of the UN is in Geneva, Switzerland, in Europe. And so many people have said if the UN does not succeed and if the U.S. would block the UN from becoming the world government they all want it to become, that the EU could very easily just continue to enlarge until it would engulf all the nations of the world. So you're asking a very astute question here, but the UN is definitely designed to be the one world government. The European Union believes there should be a one world government, but the EU is not the world organization that the UN is. The EU is actually a member of the UN, and the EU will be a part of the world government. In Revelation 13, it gives us a very clear description of the world government of the Antichrist. Feet of the bear, Russia. Mouth of the lion, Great Britain. The ten-horned beast, the 10 horns of the 10-horned beast, that will come out of the European Union, and the body of the leopard, Germany. So that's a picture of the world government, which will ultimately be under the banner of the United Nations. And only if we would kick the UN out of America, which many of us would like to happen, because it will be the government of the Antichrist. If we did that, then it would be so easy to shift the headquarters for the United Nations to Europe, like many people want to do.
So then the head of the UN could very easily become the Antichrist. Is that right?
He could, but we're not sure that will happen. For example, the strongest leaders in the world today are not heads of the UN. Right now, you've probably got the 2 strongest leaders in the world. Maybe the 3 strongest leaders in the world are Vladimir Putin, Barack Obama, and Angela Merkel. So you've got the head of Germany, the head of the United States, and the head of Russia. Presently, there are the recognized leaders of the world. Whether the Antichrist will actually be the head of the UN or not, we don't know. But we do know this. The Antichrist is going to come up among the 10-nation union from Europe and uproot 3. So he is going to come out of the European Union. Whether he's ever recognized as the head of the United Nations or not, we can't say.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Pam. Wow, great questions today. Let's go right now to James calling from Indiana. Hello, James.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question about something I heard you say. This was a few weeks back, and I've heard you mention it a couple times. This quote, you please let me know. When we were talking about the one government, the beast, and you just described it to your last caller, you said that the U.S. would not be the world government because there's no mention of the eagle's wings, correct?
Yes, that's right. That's Revelation 13, verse 1 and 2.
Now, my question was, well, the first thing that popped into my mind, it's a little pessimistic, but the first thing that popped into my mind is, well, maybe we're not mentioned as part of it because we got nuked and we're totally out of the picture.
Yeah, and James, that is a possibility. However, we've got another passage in Revelation 12 that tells us that the eagle will be protecting Israel all during the final 3.5 years, which then indicates we haven't been nuked, but that we are just simply in opposition to the one world governmental system, and we are protecting Israel against the Antichrist all during the Great Tribulation.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, because I didn't know about the timeline, because I remember it talked about how the lady is carried by the eagle's wings out into the mountain. The eagle's wings protect her or something like that.
Yeah, the Bible says that the wings of the eagle will protect the woman, and she shall be protected in her place for 3.5 years. Well, Israel's place is the land, the Holy Land, the land of Israel. So Israel is going to be safe in the land of Israel for the final 3.5 years, and it will only be invaded at the Battle of Armageddon by the Antichrist. And that's, of course, when Jesus will come. When Israel's about to go down for the count, Jesus will come, intervene, and will destroy the armies of the one world government, destroy the Antichrist, the false prophet, and establish his kingdom upon the earth at that particular time.
All right. And if you don't got time, I understand. Family in the military. What do we do about our family in the military, like right now? Is it a sin to be in the military? Because before, patriotic, and it was kind of a Christian country. And then I know you mentioned the battle around the Euphrates River is going to wipe out 1/3 of the world. that we're on one side.
Well, James, let me address that real quickly here. All of us love, or most of us love the United States of America. I shouldn't say all, but most of us love the United States of America. We thank God for religious freedom. We thank God for freedom of speech and all that the United States of America affords to us. However, when you get ready to volunteer to go shoot somebody, and when you volunteer for the military, you are saying, I will shoot someone. And if you've got an enemy over there across on the other foxhole, and you got another Christian over there, maybe on the side of Russia, and so one Christian is shooting at another, that's very troublesome to me, that one Christian would shoot to another. Furthermore, a lot of these wars, the average person merely becomes a pawn in the hands of the political leaders. And therefore, I think a person has to be very careful about enrolling in some of these things today, because once you enroll, you put yourself under the power of these political leaders, many of them who do not have godly purposes in mind. And the other thing you have to realize is that we supply soldiers to the United Nations. Once you're in, they can order you to go put on a blue beret and become a soldier in the world government forces. And that's something I could not do. I could never put on the uniform of the United Nations and become a soldier. But yet, we are supplying troops to the United Nations right now. I think they have a 50,000 strike force that they can move all over the world within a matter of a few hours. And so consequently, when Jesus said, if my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would fight. That's what Jesus said.
Yeah, another perfect answer. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, James. Do we have time for? Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. Those of you that are still waiting online, please call back tomorrow. But let me pause to say to all of you out there, we live in unprecedented times, wonderful times, by the way. God is doing great things. Satan is doing great things. We are headed for the ultimate clash. It's called Armageddon. We have produced a new series called From Here to Armageddon. The beautiful chart that goes along with this video series is stunning. You will love it. And we just show a timeline of what's going to happen from today to the Battle of Armageddon. Now, this is brand new, just out, just a week or two ago. If you do not yet have your own series, it's 8 lessons from here to Armageddon. Normally, it would be $160. We're offering it today for your gift of $120. I think every person on earth needs this series right now. If you'd like to have your own series, our operators are waiting to call for you to call right now. The number to call is 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Don't forget, from here to Armageddon. You're going to live through it. We're already heading into it. Order your own copy right now. You can see the future. The number, one more time, 1-800-363-8463, 1-800-END-TIME.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.